Hey everyone, welcome to Retire with Style. I'm Alex and I'm with my co host and very trusted friend, Wade Pfau. Wade, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you, Alex?
Good, good. Are we
That
ready to
sounded like you were in slow motion, just in case anyone was speeding up their podcast speeds. They probably you sounded normal for a moment there.
what are you trying to say, Wade? What are you trying to say, Wade?
Time to shift to 3 times speed.
All right, all right, all right. What was I going to say here? Okay. Are we ready to dispense some A knowledge for the cues that are coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. So we last few episodes are from the live edition of our Q&A session, and we were not able to get through all the questions at that time. So we're going to pick up where we left off and continue with the questions that came in for try to stump Alex and Wade on Retire with Style.
Perfect, perfect. And the first question I'd like to begin. Go on. Sorry, did I jump the
Well,
gun
it's
there?
the one I'm supposed to ask you. So,
Oh, but I wanted to. We don't do script here, Wade. I wanted to ask you a question.
oh,
Anything new, Wade? Since we've last
oh,
had small talk, we haven't had
we're
small
off the
talk in a
grid.
while.
We've gone off the grid.
We've
Help.
gone off the grid. Anything nuevo en tu vida?
Nothing in particular.
Nothing. There we
Living the
go.
life.
Just getting ready for the holiday spirit.
Yeah, that's right. By the time this episode airs, we'll be getting close to the holidays.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. All right. Well, thank you for that insight, Wade. I think everyone listening in now feels like they know you a lot more.
That's
You're like an
right.
open book, my friend. You're like an open book.
You have something you're dying to share, and that's you're hoping I'd. And how about you?
No, no. Oh, wow. Thank you for asking, Wade. No, no, no. I'm just messing with you, man. And trust me, no one wants to know. They just want to
And one of
hear
your
about.
children is not feeling well, and you're up
Oh,
here
that was
recording a
before.
podcast instead of helping them clean up after.
No, my parenting style is two words define my parenting style. Wade, natural selection.
There you go. Survival of the fittest.
Yes. So hey, it's in God's hands now. So we'll
Right.
see what happens.
Okay.
I've done what I can. No, just all right. So let's see how many of these we can knock out in this
All right.
episode. It's
Well,
it's
yep.
full of nuggets. And Wade, why don't you start unearthing them?
Yeah. Well, there were two separate questions, but I think they fit together pretty well because otherwise there may be a lot of overlap. So let me start with you, Alex. Is holding a REIT, a real estate investment trust, ETF, uh, or mutual fund, I guess. I don't think the ETF's specifically important, but is holding a REIT in an HSA, a Roth IRA, either smart or stupid? Why or why not? And at the same time, just kind of extending beyond that question, would the way that you invest in an HSA be the same as a Roth IRA?
Okay. Uh, Real quick, my first comment is I love the question. The way we are at retirement researcher is to the point, and there's no half stepping here. Smart or stupid, I like that. Just lay it on the line and let me know. Just let me have it, right? But before I get to that one, the specificity with the read, I'd like to begin just with a broader one, which I think is actually a great question. Would you invest an HSA the same as a Roth? Uh, once there's two parts of this question, Wade, and I want you to chime in here. And that's an HSA, the money goes in pre-tax and comes out tax-free. So that's a huge benefit, more so than the Roth, because you need to get taxed first on the Roth, and then you put it in the Roth, and then that's tax-free forever and ever kind of thing. So
Yeah, the HSA has the triple whammy of tax deductible contributions, tax deferred growth, and tax exempt distributions are tax free as long as they're for qualified medical expenses.
yeah, exactly. And so to some extent, and Wade and I have talked about it, and Wade even is he's in his early 40s and he's keeping receipts already. He's convinced me to start doing that
Okay.
because I thought, oh, I'm gonna get plenty sick when I'm older, so I'll have plenty of ammunition. But Wade, makes a good point.
Well, and
But
that's because if the beneficiary is not a spouse, then they have 1 year to distribute everything, just like an inherited IRA, but with a
exactly.
1 year window. Although you can apply receipts against that to reduce the taxable amount.
So Wade, stumped the chump
I've
on
already
my
saved
end.
my
He
kids more than
he.
$10,000 of taxes by collecting those receipts.
Okay. Anything else, Wade? Anything else about the receipts? Get it out of your system. Anything else before I begin
You're
again?
still bitter
Huh?
about my
Can
receipt
you can
collecting.
you turn them in for Starbucks credits and stuff like that too, or no? We good. All right. And then you can multiply those points to get platinum status at Marriott whenever
Okay.
you. By the
Well,
way,
we
Wade
could.
is like a big elitist when it comes to miles and credits and platinum and all that stuff on Bonvoy and American Airlines. But that's another topic. We can do a whole episode on just like points and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. That's do a lot of business travel, so it pays to be strategic about that.
Okay, and yes, Brianna, you are gonna have to edit this Q&A if we repost on YouTube because we're going all over the place. But that being the case, an HSA has the advantage over a Roth simply because the pre-tax component to it. You can like really put it in pre-tax, and it gets the same tax deferred and post, and income and all that kind of stuff, a tax free after you take distributions. So it has three at the Roth has two great points. The HSA has three. You want to take advantage of that. So from an order of operations, I'd probably fill that tank up first. Now, that being the case, the actual question is the investments inside of it, would they be the same?
And you
I
do
would.
need a high deductible healthcare plan to be eligible to contribute
Okay,
to.
yes. Good point. I was assuming that was already a yes, but yes, Wade, you got me.
Loopholes.
Yeah, and you need to be alive. To
Need to
let's
be
just be
alive.
clear, you need to be alive. Uh, so the actual holdings, yeah, theoretically they would be similar in nature. Like philosophically, you would want that. Now the question is, and this is a great example, TIPS is usually another good one that's brought up, but REITs, should REITs be in that? Now REITs, 90% of the payouts in REITs, I mean, 90% of the income that REITs get from their business has to be paid out to shareholders because they have like kind of a pass-through-ish kind of component, so they don't get taxed on the income. So they're going to be very, very distribution heavy, taxed at talk to your CPA, etc., but usually marginal tax rate kind of thing. So you want to make sure that you have them in these types of accounts as much as possible. They're good to have regardless, but you would want them to be there. Why? Theoretically, let's say the payout is 10%, and that's why that makes up a majority of the REIT returns, by the way. They just get reinvested, but it adds to your accumulation. So let's just go with the example. Let's say the REITs returned 10% that year, but because you're taxed at X amount and you're at the 22% rate, subtract that from the 10%, you only keep, let's just make the math easy, 8% of that return, right? And so if it's in a tax deferred account, you keep the full 10% of that. You keep the 100% of the 10% return. And so you want to make sure that you're maximizing that as much as possible. So in that vein, yes, if you find REITs an appropriate diversifier within your portfolio, which we believe so, then it would be more appropriate within these tax-free, tax deferred, and at this point even pre-tax accounts such as an HSA and an IRA. Now, and a Roth IRA. Wait.
Yeah. Just the kind of the idea is REITs are not tax efficient. So ideally with asset location, you don't want them in a taxable account. So that means IRA, Roth IRA, HSA. Generally, then we talk about if it has higher expected returns, that's more of a Roth IRA and equivalently HSA consideration. And REITs do seem to have some of that, historically speaking, potential that they're going to potentially earn more than bonds. So if you're thinking about bonds for your IRA, REITs for your HSA Roth IRA, that money also tends to be more for the long term. So the only real difference would be if you're now at the stage where you're spending from your HSA, you want to not necessarily have super volatile asset classes that you're drawing from. But other than that, yeah, I think REITs are entirely appropriate as a consideration
The
for
other
that tax exempt account
the other
space.
comment, because you brought up a good point, and this is the other. This is kind of an assumption that I'm just taking for granted, but let me not take it for granted. I'm always assuming you have a diversified portfolio, and the question doesn't mean only REITs in an IRA or only like
Yeah.
tip bonds or something like that. And let's say they have a $100,000 portfolio. Excuse me, $100,000 portfolio. 90,000 of it is in an IRA. I don't expect a 90% allocation to REITs. I expect a fully diversified portfolio, and whatever the REIT allocation would have been within that portfolio is in that particular account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's
asset
how I would.
allocation comes
Yeah,
first, and then to the extent you have the capacity, the asset location is the secondary consideration.
and there it is. Anything to add, Wade?
No, I think we've figured out. So it's potentially smart rather than stupid, because that may not be for everyone.
Yes, you get an S. You get an S.
You get a smart, rated smart by retirement.
No, but that's a good question. I mean, yeah, I get it. Smart, stupid. There are no stupid questions. Only stupid people that ask questions, right? Wade? Or smart people that. No, I mean, look. At the end of the day, that's how we do it here, so that's fine. No, I think it's a good question. It's smart. It's smart to do so. All right, next question. I'll hit this up for Wade. I have greatly enjoyed episodes for tax planning in retirement. Regarding the three tax traps in retirement, many of us appear to be individual. Example, the IRMA. What but what if you are married filing jointly? How does that work? So what they're getting at is, and I'm sorry, when I read it, I'm kind of reading it slow, so I miss the proper cadence. Effectively, in our episodes, we did it on tax planning in retirement. Many of the things we talked about, we happened to point out individual cases, and we didn't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we did and we didn't. We didn't point out. Oh, but married filing jointly, this would be the issue. Wade, take it away.
Yeah, I'm gonna take umbrage with the question, or at least
Whoa!
maybe we didn't explain it right, but no, it's individual and married filing jointly, same considerations. The three tax traps, I think, refers to, we talked about the Social Security tax torpedo, where as you draw in income, if that uniquely causes more of your Social Security to be taxed, it increases your effective marginal tax rate. Medicare IRMA, the one mentioned, where as your income exceeds certain thresholds, that can uniquely create big jumps in your Medicare premiums for Part B and Part D. And then the third tax trap, I'm assuming, would be a reference to the preferential income stacking issue, where as I draw ordinary income, if that starts to push my long-term gains or qualified dividends from 0% rate into the 15% rate, that increases the effective marginal tax rate. And all three of those, there's no distinction between single filing and married filing jointly. They apply equally to both. So if we somehow didn't explain that well, let's just clarify. It's really the same impact for both single filers and married filing jointly. The thresholds where things happen will differ, because in the lower income ranges, usually the married filing jointly thresholds are double the single filer thresholds, although that's not fully the case with Social Security. But otherwise, it does apply equally in both scenarios. And I'm not entirely sure what motivated the question in terms of with Medicare, it's per person. So if you're married filing jointly, if only one of you is on Medicare, you only have the premium jump for one person. But if both of you are in Medicare, you have the premium jump for both people. With Social Security, maybe only one person's claimed, but if you're filing jointly, the filing jointly thresholds would apply to that one person's benefit. So it impacts couples in the same manner as it impacts single people. There's not any like unique difference between the two cases.
Yeah, I think the threshold when they're combined, the thresholds are just it's the same rules apply. It's just the thresholds are higher, kind of thing for a majority of the things. I would say this, Wade. I'm sure you did a fantastic job, a stalwart job of this. I wouldn't beat yourself up for it. You can hold your head up high. You're good. Don't worry about it. Whenever you're feeling bad about yourself, just read some of the reviews of the podcast that have my name on it, and I
That's
think
right.
you'll start feeling much better. So don't worry about it, okay, buddy?
Okay, thank you.
You're good.
So,
You're good. No, but
so
I do empathize with this person simply because when you're learning this stuff, the reality is it gets really confusing. Individual, join, and then you get all these beneficiary designations, and so I can see people just being like, they're trying to get the orientation and calibration right. So
uh-huh.
it's fine.
And these questions help because it does help us then. Maybe there's some
No, no, no,
nuance
no,
that
no,
we
no, no,
get.
no. You're not allowed to backtrack at all. You stick with you stick with what you said. Don't now rewind and say, "Oh, but that's a great question." No, 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 no. Wait.
No,
You spoke your piece. Just let
helps
it
us
let it sit.
explain things better in the future because we know where something we just maybe assumed or didn't think about. It helps to know how that could be interpreted differently, and so now we can improve our explanations about it.
So you went from taking umbrage to what now?
Well, I was not offended by the question. I was just there's no difference. Single, it applies the same single and married filing jointly. So it's not an issue just for single people by any means.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
What's
Next
next?
question.
Next question. You're next.
All right. We're going to ask you whether you're smarter than Warren Buffett. So, Warren
Okay,
Buffett.
that's a quick answer. But go on.
So, Alex, Warren Buffett has said to invest 90% of your assets in the S&P 500 and 10% in cash and bonds. Would you say that this is a good general guideline for anyone to follow?
Yeah, I would answer this in a couple ways. The first one, I don't think this person's meaning it this way, but sometimes when people begin a sentence with Warren Buffett says, it's kind of like they're trying to set up like this person, you're not more credible than this person. And if this person says this, then you should be doing that. And if you're not, you're an idiot, kind of thing.
Sounds like you're taking
I
umbrage with
don't
the question.
say it again.
Sounds like you're taking umbrage with the question.
No, I said I don't think this person is doing
Oh, okay.
that. Although I don't know technically, it's hard to read tenor in these things. But when you're in meetings with people or you're just talking with somebody, they kind of love to pull that one out, right? Warren Buffett said blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? And I could care less to some extent what he says or not. Not because of Warren Buffett, but ultimately, I'm not so sure he's in the weeds with regards to retirement income planning, financial planning, wealth management. That's different than an investor.
And
You
the
know,
other thing too, I don't know the exact context. I thought he said that's how he invests for like his wife if he were to
yeah,
pass
but
away.
when
And he's
you're
dramatically
yeah, and his wife
overfunded.
has like I don't know
She's
$20 billion. I mean,
yeah, she's not at
yeah,
risk of depleting her portfolio in retirement.
I mean, come on. So I would just begin it like that. Like, who cares what Warren Buffett says? Honestly, this is not about Warren Buffett says when you look at a balance sheet, this is X Y Z, or Warren Buffett said when analyzing a company, X Y Z. Other than that, I don't really care. It's like Michael Jordan says this about retirement income planning. I don't care. That's kind of my initial response when that begins. Why? Because I'm a human being, and you kind of see that, and you're like, yeah, whatever, right? That being the case, he's not an advisor in the sense of helping people. So he's looking at it from the standpoint of investment only, right? And when it comes to investment only, I would say there's a lot of truth to this from the standpoint of so he's just basically saying put 90% in the S&P, 10% in cash bonds. And cash bonds could be very different because you can have bonds that are as risky as stocks. When you go into the corporate junk world, but I don't know exactly how that's meant. So let's just take the 90% in the S&P 500 and 10% just cash safety money, right? So 90% in the S&P 500 to call it a day. Now, if you look at the overall stock market, when it comes to investing and outperformance, you're significantly better off in an S&P 500 than picking a couple of stocks because you're going to outperform the index. If you outperform the index, look at the arc that we did on what not to do from an investing standpoint. I would say you're going to have trouble pointing out to me or to anyone how that's beyond chance outcome, beyond how that's beyond the chance outcomes, because you consistently see underperformance. If after 10 years you benchmark yourself against the S&P 500, I'm going to say at least 85% of active managers will have underperformed, right? And the 15% that outperformed, if you put them if you look at them the next 10 years or whatever, they go back to the mean, right? And so when it comes to investment advice, yeah, absolutely, put it in the S&P 500. But could we do better than that from an investment standpoint? Absolutely. And what I mean by that is, I think I'm doing this from memory, Wade, so correct me, but if you look at individual stocks, investing in an individual stock versus the S&P 500, and you want to see how much of the market you're capturing, an individual stock will probably explain like an R square of 20 to 30, like it'll explain 20 to 30% of the variance of all stock market movements. That means that sometimes when you buy a stock, it could be a great stock, but the market tanks by 30% that year, your stock is most likely going to be down as well because it's just a stock, in the market as opposed to its prospects as a business. It's going to be subject to the same macro environment as the others, right? And if the market drops by 30%, you can assume something happened, right? So you're not getting diversification, and hence this variance can kill you on the downside. Hence, the 90% of the S&P, hence an allocation to the S&P 500 is better than individual stocks because you're missing out on expected returns, systemic expected returns. Now, that being the case, the S&P 500, which is the index of large companies within the overall stock market, will explain a lot of the variance of the overall stock market, but probably still something closer to, like, let's just say in the 70s. The R square on that would gone. A single factor model will explain maybe 70%, right?
Are you going off the angle of S&P versus like a globally diversified portfolio? Because I
Yeah.
was just thinking it's more, forget the S&P 500 part, just 90% stock allocation. Is that appropriate? Is it
Oh,
going
okay. No, I was going in the choice. No, I was going
Oh,
in the
okay.
S&P
Yeah, I
500.
interpreted that completely differently. But
All right, all right. Well, then you could finish it off how you do it, and they
okay.
get, it's 2 for 1, right? Yeah, and so now I'm looking at the S&P 500, and you could do better than that because that's a single factor model that explains probably 70 in the mid 70% of all stock market returns. And so you layer in a value. There's different premiums that you get compensated for investing and systematically capturing within the stock market, right? The S&P is large cap, right? So there's value, there's momentum, there's size, there's things you can also expose your portfolio to capture more of the returns that are available. And then you go to internationally. This was asked last time. Why internationally? Internationally, the expected returns are going to be the same as domestically, but they increase the opportunity set of the different stocks that you can capture. So it just helps you because there's such a concentration, even the S&P 500, there's such a concentration within the top 10 stocks. And it happens all the time. It's not just happening right now. That by having other large caps that also help explain variance within overall stock market returns, it's actually a good thing, not a bad thing, because as much as it can help you on the upside being concentrated, it can really hurt you on the downside. And when it's just luck either way, you want to kind of just protect yourself. And so to me, a good general guideline is allocate to the different areas of the market in which you have systematic expected returns, right? Not just the S&P 500, although the S&P 500 is superior to just picking a stock and letting it run, or picking 5 stocks and letting them run. So to that extent, Warren Buffett is correct. But when you get to diversifying a portfolio, especially when you're trying to determine retirement income strategies and the like, I think it falls short of the mark, right? The fact that that person brings up Warren Buffett, who cares? Now, Wade's point about 90% equity, 10% cash bonds. I wasn't here to judge that. I just assume Warren Buffett would that's just a random number that was just arbitrarily thrown up 90-10. I think that's an aggressive one, but I think there's a question that we're asking later on that maybe helps answer that a little bit. But Wade, what's your take on the second part of the second
Well,
interpretation,
that
which is the one you had?
yeah, I'm not a Warren Buffett historian, but so I don't know the full context. But I thought I've seen at some point he was talking about how he allocates like for his spouse, and that's kind of she's if you gave her a funded ratio, she's probably dramatically overfunded. In fact, the 10% in cash is probably 10 times more than she'll ever spend in her lifetime to begin with. And so that allocation can make perfect sense because once you've got your lifestyle protected and covered, then you can be more aggressive with the discretionary wealth above that. And so he's really, for the most part, investing that for the next generation, or I think in his case, more for like charitable type. Like this is a permanent foundation to support charities over the long term. So 90% stocks for that can make perfect sense. Going beyond that, though, of course, you have to consider your risk tolerance and you have to consider your retirement style and how well funded you are with respect to having reliable income in place. If you have a floor of protected reliable income that covers your basics and you have the risk tolerance to handle it, the math is in favor over the long term of getting greater long-term growth, especially with a flexible spending strategy for the discretionary expenses off a higher stock allocation. So yeah, you can't argue with just on a mathematical basis that sort of allocation being fine if you're comfortable sticking to it and you can sleep at night with it and you've got your basics covered. If those things don't apply to you, though, then that's definitely a lot more aggressive than we usually hear for retirees and maybe too aggressive for many people. So you got to,
But Wade, now I'm going to
as
ask
a
you
general
another question.
guideline, maybe not.
But now I'm going to ask you a question, and it wasn't asked, but I think it dovetails with this one. And I think we can also address the last question we were going to do today, since we're kind of on this topic a little bit. It makes sense just to continue it. But okay, you had said, the math makes sense, but I want people to understand the following. Why not put 100% equity in a portfolio for retirement if you know that it has a 30-year time horizon? And if you look at any 10-year rolling historical return, stock markets have it's up there. Let me just say 90% chance of outperforming on a rolling return basis the risk-free rate. So why not just put it in that if that's my horizon in retirement? Because if I retire at 60, let's just say 20 years, right? I retire at 65. I got 20 years on this portfolio at 85, if not more. So why don't I just put it in 100% equities?
Well, you've got the sequence of returns risk issue that when you're spending from the portfolio, you're more vulnerable to short temporary type downturns that don't recover quick enough. But even beyond that, going back to Bill Bengen's original study on the 4% rule, he called for retirees should have 75% stocks in retirement, never less than 50% stocks. You see that come up in many subsequent studies that even in spite of sequence of returns risk, higher stock allocations usually give you a much better average performance without much worse outcomes in terms of the downside potential risk if things go really poorly in retirement. The 4% rule didn't apply to 100% stocks because there were a few historical cases where you could have gotten into trouble. Not that much more trouble. It still did better than like 20% stocks.
Yeah, but
Uh,
oh, sorry, finish your answer.
oh,
My
but I
bad.
mean, but that being said, this assumes you're comfortable with a very aggressive stock allocation and that you will stick with it and not panic and sell off your stocks after a downturn, which can then really dig a hole for you. Because if markets go down and come back up, but you panicked and sold after they went down, you miss the
And,
subsequent recovery and you've really
and Wade,
disrupted.
what did the creator of the 4% rule do about 18 months ago, or something weird like that,
Oh
when
yeah,
the
there was
markets were
something.
jittery?
It
What
was
happened
during the
then?
spring of 2020. I
Oh, that late?
think
Okay.
oh
What
yeah,
happened
didn't it?
4 years ago then? I thought
Uh,
it was like 2 years ago. What happened a few years back to the creator of the 4% rule, Bengnan, when
yeah,
he got the nervous
he was
Nellies?
He was interviewed in one of the financial advisor publications, a Think Advisor or Financial Planning or something. And he did, I don't remember the exact details, so I don't want to guess, but he did dramatically lower his stock allocation despite all of his research showing you should not do that. And I don't remember the specifics off the top of my head about what exactly happened there.
I think there was an article in the New York Times that
Oh,
mentioned
was
it,
it the
and
New York
everyone,
Times? It
I think
might
so,
have
and
been.
everyone was like, "What?" Like, and the big takeaway was, "Oh my God, he lowered his like, what the hell is he doing?" Uh, that being the case, the other part that I think goes unnoticed all the time is it doesn't really affect the success rates all that much if you're like at a 40% allocation to equities versus 70% allocation to equities in terms of sustainable withdrawal rates. You may know that better off the top of your head, but directionally it's not a move the needle kind of number. It's like, you know what, you're going to be fine in a 40-60 portfolio versus a 60-40 portfolio. So why do you need that aggravation? Unless the goal is legacy, maximize legacy as much as humanly possible. But
Mm-hmm.
we don't really see that much.
Yeah.
Usually when we're talking to clients, there are cases, right, where somebody has a significant amount of money and becomes about being impactful for the next generation. But let's just say for the folks between, 0 to 5 million even, a lot of the conversations are about, hey, I want to make sure I can maintain this standard of living, and whatever's left over, fine, but that's gravy. Hence, what is this race to die with the most amount of money for? Right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand it. And so there it
Yeah, there's
is.
a range from about 30 to 80% stocks where it doesn't really impact what the safe withdrawal rate is in terms of a spending rate, but the higher the stock allocation on average, the better the outcomes in terms of remaining wealth balance at the end of that retirement horizon.
Okay. The other the other thing is, yeah, I know, but when income is the outcome, at least as a theme, you got to pick your battles a little bit. The other thing, because I think this is similar, because it was talking about allocations in retirement, why not 100%, etc. There's also a human capital piece that you don't have anymore. You're not working, so you're a little more susceptible to liquidity events and things like that. Hence, uh, I don't necessarily buy the argument of why not 100% in stocks. I think that's an Excel answer, and it's not grounded in like real life events. Is the best answer I can give you with regards to that. Uh, Also, it goes unnoticed, but the magnitude of drops once you're retired as a percent of your net worth is greater. Right? And what I mean by that is when you're in your 30s, a 20% drop, and you're building assets doesn't hit you as hard as when you're in your 60s and you have this 20% drop in terms of nominal wealth. So you want to make sure you're always like on guard for stuff like that. Even though you're gonna, because if you're in year two, the markets go down 30%. I don't know how much solace you're going to find into but don't worry. This is a 30-year horizon. I'm going to be fine. I think you put your Begnan hat on, you get a little nervous, and you start making decisions because you're going to say to yourself, this time it's different. That kind of thing. It's
Yeah,
just a
that's
human
like if you're
nature thing.
probability based, you're more likely to be able to weather those downturns. But if you got put into a probability based strategy that wasn't right for you, you may not weather those downturns as well.
Yeah, and we've seen that plenty. All right. I mean, there's look, we're coming off of an election. We have clients. We have clients that are conservative. We have clients that are liberals. And you can imagine, as with any election, the losing folks get a little nervous with regards to who's coming into office and the like. And so this is not a political statement, but but everyone I think can right now relate to it. If the person is in office and it's not someone that you voted for, you may be thinking, my goodness, what do I do with my investments now? Because the next 4 years is going to be different, right? And I'm bringing this up to point out all the things that are going to happen over the next 30 years, right? That you're going to have some serious consternation about. And you're going to be like, my goodness, I have to do something with my portfolio. So as disciplined as you think you are, you're probably not when it comes to maintaining this very, very aggressive portfolio in retirement. That being said, Wade, I'm going to ask you the next question, which is, when would one start allocating money towards more fixed income cash like investments? 10 years out from retirement? 5 years out? Never. And I think first determine your style, right? And then go from there. But I'll let you take it away, man.
Well, that was supposed to be the question I asked you, but now that you
Oh,
did
really? Oh, yeah. Okay, wait. Why don't you let me ask myself this question? Well, we
ask
were kind
yourself.
of like tag teaming this answer, and I started truthfully. I Let me do this again because we're going to record this and set this up separately on YouTube. You want to ask me the same question, and then
All
I'll
right, I'll
just.
ask you. So,
All right, go ahead.
Alex, when would you or
Wait,
one?
wait, take it from the top. And listeners on the podcast, I appreciate your patience. We just need a clean edit, and we don't edit the podcast. Fire away, Wade.
Okay, Alex, when would one start allocating money towards more fixed income or cash like investments? 10 years out from retirement? 5 years? Never?
Some of the above, none of the above, or all of the above. Well, right off the bat, I would imagine this question is asking as you're getting close to retirement, when do you start shifting? When do you start downshifting from an allocation, if at all? Our view is that effectively, as the 5 years before retirement and the 5 years after retirement, we reference them as the fragile decade. Wade, I believe, is the one that coined that term, and
Some
that
people think that. And I don't think
some.
it's true,
Oh,
but
it's not you.
people have
Then
said that about me, but I don't think I did that.
you know what? Wait, it was me. It was me.
Maybe
No,
there's
no,
one.
no, no. I don't know. The fragile decade, right? Let's just say the fragile decade, right? And that, and what that means is that you have to be fortunate as you retire to be in a good economic cycle. And what I mean by that is the market returns you experience 5 years before and 5 years after you retire are going to have a disproportionate effect on the income that you're able to take, specifically if you're in a total return strategy, right? And so, from that manner, if you, I'm going to assume now you are a total return investor asking me this question. That assumption is a good one, because not a good one in the sense that it's good, you should be. It's a good one in the sense that first we need to determine what strategy you are in. The answer would be very different from somebody who's time segmentation, somebody who's risk wrap, and somebody who's income protection. That's
Well,
important for us because by default, I think we've done the industry a disservice. We as an advisors presenting like the total return as your main strategy, and then there's everything else. And total return is just one of four. So, assuming that you fall into the total return bucket, I think you should ready your portfolio for retirement income. Let's say 2 years before you retire, as you're onboarding into this fragile decade, right? And you could do many things. You can go straight to fixed income, and how much, it's relative to the financial plan, relative to how much. There's two things. Risk is two things: a preference, and sometimes it's a necessary thing if you want to accomplish certain goals, right? Sometimes you may need to capture returns for something 20 years out, and there's nothing that's really going to get you that unless it's a market driven return that you're invested in over 20 years, so you can count on time diversification, etc. Absent of that, though, kind of have to figure things out. And so, assuming though that that's the case, you want to begin to start prepping your portfolio beforehand from a capacity and need standpoint. Now, there's that. You have to reconcile that with your personal risk tolerance, not RISA profile, retirement income style. Retirement income style comes first. But once you've determined that, and let's assume you're in the total return, then you can work on the allocation. And so that's a balance between your risk tolerance, your preference of how much risk you can take, sleep at night, that kind of thing, versus how much do you need from a resource standpoint, because you may need to take on more risk than necessary, or you can take on less. You'll find some baseline allocation from there, and then as you retire, you work the portfolio to a more greater and greater fixed income allocation. So by the time you're retired, you're at that sweet spot. Whatever that movement is dependent on an idiosyncratic variable, which is yourself. Now, that being the case, there's one strategy that Wade's written about that gets talked about quite a lot, I see it as more of a time segmentation strategy, but it's the rising glide path in which you take a um you front load the allocation to fixed income. Let's this is a pure mind thought example, but let's say your 80/20 portfolio right now and you're 5 years from retirement and you're like, okay, 80/20, it fits my risk profile, but you know what? I got to get ready for this fragile decade, and I'm a total return person, so I know probability based thinking. Well, I believe that it's going to work out over 20 plus years, but I got to do something for the first 10, and I don't want to buy anything that's a structured investment contract. I don't want to do a bond ladder. I don't want to, whatever, put it in Bitcoin, whatever have you, right? And so what I want to do is start at a higher than normal bond allocation, and that's going to be my quote unquote buffer from a portfolio standpoint. And I'm going to start at, let's say, I think I'm going to end at 50/50 when all is said and done. So I'm going to go 30/70 right now. 30% stock, 70% fixed income, which is artificially high. But by the time I retire, I'll reduce that bond allocation every year, a certain percent. So by the time I'm retired, um, I'm at 50/50. You know what I mean? And then maybe 5 years into it, I can be 55/45. And that will be my settling. And what that has allowed me to do it's reduced the variability of my portfolio. And so once it gives me the best chance to have the steadiest value while I'm taking distributions during the important fragile decade. That's how I would be thinking about it. What that number is, I think you need to get that baseline with a financial plan and determine the context of what you're doing, and then back into the allocation that gets you there. And hopefully that reconciles with your risk tolerance. If it doesn't, then you have a little bit more work to do. Wade?
Yeah, I guess I'd just maybe answer it a little more simply in terms of, I think, 5 to 10 years before retiring. That's a good time to start thinking about the transition to your retirement income plan, which implies a shift from stocks to fixed income, broadly defined. That's where you look at your retirement income style. If your total returns, you'll just lower your stock allocation in that lead up to retirement to help manage that sequence of returns risk. Then you could use that rising equity glide path post-retirement. If your time segmentation, you start switching from bond funds to individual bonds to build that ladder so that you get to retirement with 5 to 10 years of fixed income maturing bonds for the next 5 to 10 years to cover those early years. If your income protection, start thinking about shifting some of those bonds into deferred income annuities or some sort of fixed annuity with a living benefit, probably. And if you're risk wrap, you might look more at shifting over into some sort of variable annuity with a living benefit and with a deferral period of 5 to 10 years before you turn on income. And there you go. That covers all 4 retirement styles. 5 to 10 years before retirement, ideally, you start making that transition.
Voila, there it is. All right, Wade. I think we're good on time. Do you want to call that one for today's session, and we'll fire up another round of questions for the next one?
That sounds good. Yeah, we still have more questions, so probably at least another episode. But yeah, let's go ahead and hit the stop button for today. So thanks everyone for joining Retire with Style, and we'll catch you next time with more of your questions answered by Wade and Alex.
All right, everyone. Take care.